But I tried to send it back to you. Are you a host, Anna?
I'm not the host. I can just present if I have something to present. The presenting you need, when Kathy gets on, you can move it to her. If this is recording, I'm just reminding everyone we're recording. I'll do it as people join on.
I did it.
You did. Thank you so much for the gift.
You're welcome.
And we are recording. I know there are a few people who will not be able to join us tonight. And I think once Kathy gets on, we will go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information in a short amount of time. And I just want to make sure we have enough time for any questions and those kind of things. So once I give Kathy the ball to present and she's ready, we'll be good. I'll go ahead and get started. Just first of all, thank you, everyone. I know this was an additional meeting to what we were normally used to, of meeting once a month. We do have a few people watching, so hello to all of the attendees. Kathy Johnson, myself, and Zach will tag team on presenting the scenarios. Honestly, it's primary Kathy and Zach. I'll just chime in where I need. They will show two options, and the second option has like a point A, like option 2A, regarding the repurposing of Kennedy and having the K-5 students to attend other locations. So once Kathy's camera comes on, I'll shift it. The first option, I could just give some background, would be looking at what we talked about last time, shifting the students between New York and Prairie Park. And option 2 will be looking at shifting the students between Courtly, Prairie Park, and New York. And the 2A option, I'm just front loading, will look at if we sent all of the current students who are Kennedy students in Prairie Park who are ESL to Courtly. So Kathy and Zach will share. Thank you. And again, anybody watching, this is recorded. So anything that you say will be recorded and shared.
Do you want me to start, Anna? Okay, let me see if I can share my PowerPoint here.
While Kathy is getting her PowerPoint, I will just tell you our goal at the end of this as a committee, because budget has asked us to look at this scenario, is to select a scenario for budget to be able to look at more closely on Wednesday. So we're just based off what the budget committee has asked. We are from one of the 3 scenarios. We'll say this is the one that we have consensus on for the budget committee to explore further on Wednesday.
Okay, do you see everything the way you need to, I think? Okay. So what we're sharing is the boundary proposals of Kennedy becoming an early childhood center, and that Kennedy would no longer be the K-5 grades. So students, we started by looking at students residing in Kennedy school boundary, because those are the ones that where the boundaries get adjusted to, move them to a different school location. And I'll let Zach address the tool and how he has navigated that if there's questions. But basically, when we looked at the Kennedy school boundary, there's 229 residing students. There's 172 that are attending Kennedy, and the others you can see in this chart are the other schools that those schools residing in Kennedy are actually attending. The one that's the biggest number is our ESL students in that boundary, and they're attending Hillcrest. I do want to point out that we also have kids that are coming to Kennedy from outside of a Kennedy school boundary, and those we'll look at, and Anna can address any questions, but that would be following our transfer policy and going back to that policy and navigating for those families from there. So the 172 in this information that we're talking about tonight is from actual attending on the March 17th date that we pulled this information. Projections for Kennedy, and again, those would have been projections for 21-22, was approximately 188 students that we thought might be coming to Kennedy next year. Projections are based on just moving kids up a grade, estimating kindergarten, and then trying to adjust for any other known variables. We're working with that 172 as kind of the movement of kids, but we know too that actual enrollment in the fall for the 21-22 years is really going to be the final impact on assigned classroom sections, et cetera. So we're using the best information that we can, but until the actual kids appear in their seats, it is just estimates and projections that we're trying to work from with the best information that we can. So the next slide just indicates what those boundary options are that we'll talk about. The first one being what we'll call option 1, and that is looking at north of 19th Street going to New York and south of 19th Street basically going to Prairie Park. The second option that we'll look at is bringing Quarterly into the mix. And so you'll see the boundary line of basically south of 15th, east of Harper, and north of 23rd, those Kennedy students navigating to Prairie Park, south of 19th, north of 23rd, west of Harper to Cordley, and then a kind of section or group of families in the Glen Drive, Maple Lane, 19th and Harper section. And then we looked at basically option 2, but then also looked at all the ESL kids that are currently with Kennedy, and then also the ones that are currently with Prairie Park. And instead of them being bused or over to the Hillcrest ESL cluster site, what would happen if they went to the Cordley ESL cluster site instead? So just throwing that out there as an option of just to look at it. So we'll go ahead and kind of work through these, and Zach and I are going to kind of tag team based on some of the screens. So the first one we're going to look at is this option 1. And I'm going to let Zach look at or talk through this next slide, which is the north of 19th Street.
So at our last meeting, we were able to look at the tool that we use to map and to see which students live within those boundaries, but also attend which school. So when we look at all the students that reside in Kennedy boundaries north of 19th Street, it breaks down this way. So there's 79 students that actually attend Kennedy, and then we see a handful of students that attend elsewhere. And we'll see that the Hillcrest students are the ELL students that are attending, that live in Kennedy boundaries but attend Hillcrest. So with that, we have here the top left chart, the ELL students. So we can see that all 14 of those ELL students attend Hillcrest that live in the boundaries of Kennedy, north of 19th Street. Now there are 3 ELL kids that do attend Kennedy that New York would be absorbing. The bottom right-hand chart shows our SPED groups. And we see that there are 21 students, SPED students, that currently attend Kennedy that New York would be absorbing. And so we will continue to work with the SPED department to evaluate those impacts and move forward from there.
Estimating the impact to classroom sections based on projections. New York is a Title I school and would continue to be a Title I school, so we've used those thresholds, which you'll see over here. We indicate initially that third grade would become 3-section instead of 2 sections, and you can see what the approximate enrollment would be at each grade level, bringing them up to 281 as a total. There was a walkthrough done, I believe Zach and Kevin, and communication with the building administration, and I believe Larry from F&O.
Yep.
Yeah, walked through the building, and they did indicate or found that New York does have the capacity to add the 1 classroom. And so there would be a need for that at New York based on this scenario. So then the other half of the kids is the next piece.
So this is going to be south of 19th Street within the Kennedy boundary that would be moving to Prairie Park. And just like we saw before in the other chart, we look at the Kennedy students that are attending Kennedy, and there's 93 students that would be shifting down to Prairie Park. We see that there's 24 at Hillcrest, and on the next slide, we'll notice that those 24 are ELL students that are going to Hillcrest. Now, there are 7 ELL students that are attending Kennedy right now that would be absorbed by Prairie Park. Also, the special education, we see that there's 15 special education students at Kennedy that Prairie Park would also be absorbing.
So based on this, trying to look to see what the impacts would be to classroom sections based on those projections. Some of our 2 sections went to 3, and some of our 3 sections went to 4. And you'll see that basically 5 new sections could be created by doing this particular scenario. I do point out that it is estimated on any of these classroom sections based on projections, and that they are subject to change with actual attendance in the fall. We're just estimating the best that we can based on the information that we know. A walkthrough with the same people as walked through New York. There was an indication that Prairie Park does have the capacity for the 5 classrooms without changing existing special education needs in that building. Prairie Park is currently not a Title I school, but you'll see I used Title I thresholds here because we would anticipate in this particular option, Kennedy would no longer be the Title I school, but Prairie Park would likely pick that up based on initial changes in SCS and what that does with the Prairie Park. And so in anticipation of that, and to be able to determine what the sections would look like with that current threshold used with those buildings, 5 would be the increase there. So navigating forward, first with transportation, and Zach can address this if I missed something, but basically transportation currently in the school district is provided to students who live 2.5 miles or more from their home school. Students below 2.5 miles, we do not provide transportation to, but can ride a bus if space becomes available or the bus is going through or something like that. With option 1 that we just talked through, I believe there are 2 students who will be over 2.5 miles or more from New York that are currently not being bused, but everybody else still lives under that 2.5 threshold. And if I misspoke on that, Zach, please add.
You did not.
So then the next slide is what does the estimated savings of option 1. So teacher-wise, there would be, these are average costs. And when I say average costs, It's just the average cost of that position in the district. Average cost includes salary, it includes FICA and Medicare, work comp, unemployment, health, dental, and vision, and their 403B. So it is all those costs per position across the district. So, as though 5 would be the positions for teachers, then there would no longer be a principal need, administrative assistance, a guidance, learning coach, nursing, library media, all of those, because the building that the kids are going to already have those resources. And in Prairie Park's case in particular, already of 1.0 for all of those. So none of our elementary buildings have more than 1.0 in guidance, for example. So through attrition, the positions being reduced, or those staff would be able to be placed across the district in open vacancies, or have opportunities to be placed in other open positions within the district. And I believe that HR has worked, and Anna can chime in if she needs to, but believe that there's positions that they've already know and have not been hiring for in anticipation of wanting to make sure that they have those spaces. So the net decrease of the 5 is a result of, if Kennedy, the proposed FTE for Kennedy for next year is 11. So we would need 5 for the Prairie Park and 1 for New York, which leaves the 5 from the 11 is how that's gotten to.
Yes, just to confirm what Kathy said, preliminary, HR and Samry's on here. We've looked at our current openings and what it would be, and we are 99% sure that we would be able to place place anyone who wants to continue on with the district.
So that would be the estimated potential savings from option 1. So now we'll move into option 2. And option 2 is, instead of just going to New York and Prairie Park, what happens if we bring Cordley into the mix? And so the boundaries would be the south of 15th, east of Harper, north of 23rd to Prairie Park, south of 19th, north of 23rd, west of Harper to Cordley, and then the block of Glen Drive, Maple Lane, 19th and Harper section would go to New York. And so navigating through the same type of slides.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
Just between you and Zach, just because I don't really remember and I'm having a hard time visualizing that, and just because it was a concern last time with this option and those groups, does that prevent any kids from crossing 23rd to get to a school, or does it just drastically limit anyone who would have to cross 23rd Street to get to a school?
I'll let Zach piggyback, but I don't think we were able to do anything that would prevent any kids from crossing 23rd. But Zach, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so GR, the section that's going over to Cordley was a sizable section that would have had to cross 23rd. They do now have to cross Mass Street. And so you're still crossing a major intersection one way or the other.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
And so on this one, the students that are going to New York, it's a small
Can
corner.
I just add that there are already Cordley kids who already cross Mass Street? It would just be increasing the, yeah.
Correct. And then the 23rd Street would be similar to what Schwegler has, crossing 23rd Street just in the other direction down to Prairie Park. So here we have fewer students going to New York. We have about 19 students. And it's a small corner of the Kennedy boundary that's on the west side of Harper and north of 19. And so again, we see that there's a few ELL students too, and 7 SPED students that would be attending New York based on this.
Impacting classroom sections. Fewer kids are moving to New York than option 1. It maintains 2 sections across, does not need the extra section added. In this scenario, they remain a Title I. And so that's what New York would look like under this section. So not really significant changes to New York under option 2. Looking at Cordley's impact.
Cordley is impacted a lot more. Now, this is between 19th and 23rd. So south of 19th, north of 23rd, and west of Harper. That section of kiddos, there's about 75 students there that would go from Kennedy to Cordley. And we have Cordley, in this scenario, we have 5 ELL students that are currently at Kennedy that would be attending Cordley. Now, we do have the option 2A that we'll discuss later about that. And then Cordley would also have 11 SPED students to absorb.
So looking at Cordley, we actually are looking at Cordley in 2 different manners because we are still working out the free and reduced details of a couple of different aspects of the scenarios, both 2 and 2A. And we'll need to look at it holistically before we can determine exactly what the Title I impact is by option 2. But if I look at Cordley as a Title I school, you'll see the thresholds are 24, 26, and 29. If they remain a non-title school, which is what they are currently, those thresholds currently in the current year are 25, 27, and 29. So if they become title and the thresholds hold at the 24, 26, and 29, there would be 1 section needed. And you can see that that's at 3rd grade. And if they're non-title, then that would be 2 section. You'll also see that that could become a hot spot and they may end up being 3 sections anyway before all was said and done. Again, totally estimates at this stage of the game. We really don't know exact numbers in classes until they start coming in the fall. And some of this moves in the fall when the actual kids show up in those seats. The walkthrough through the building of Cordley indicates they have the capacity to go up to as many as 5 classrooms. And so that's kind of what this would look like for Cordley. So then there's the impact of Prairie Park.
Now, Prairie Park, fewer students go there. So initially we had 93 students headed to Prairie Park. In this scenario, we have 78 students headed to Prairie Park. And out of those, there would still be the 3 students who are ESOL, and then we have 18 students who identify as SPED going to Prairie Park.
So navigating forward again, currently Prairie Park is not a title school. So I've got both options here just so we can see what that impact would be, depending upon thresholds that are currently in place. Either direction, 4 additional sections would be needed. Wouldn't matter if we were using the title thresholds or the non-title thresholds. Again, the walkthrough through the building indicated they could go up to 5. Currently, Prairie Park is not a Title I school. And so this would be what those sections look like in this particular scenario. Transportation-wise, again, currently we do only transport those 2.5 or more. And if they're below that amount, unless there's a bus going by the area or there's space available kind of thing, that would be the only time someone is riding. Based on these options, there were no students over 2.5 miles from their new home school. So we would not see transportation outside the norm of current transportation provided. The savings on this would just be an additional section that the teachers You're taking the 11 from Kennedy minus the 4 Prairie Park would need, and 1 additional need at Cordley. Otherwise, the positions remain the same. You will note that there's actually an add of a secretary. That's for Prairie Park, whereas the others are changed the other direction. So the last option that we'll share, and then we can, I have a couple more. So looking at the ESL attending Hillcrest cluster, and maybe looking at what happens if they attend Cordley instead. So if you remember on all of the scenarios, we have a cluster of kids that are in the residing boundary of Kennedy, but they are actually attending Hillcrest as their ESL cluster site. Cordley is also an ESL cluster site. It's actually probably closer than Hillcrest for all of these scenarios. And so looking at that, what does that mean, or what would that do to Cordley? And this would be adding those kiddos into Cordley on top of what we've already done with option 2. So we know that there's 38 students residing in Kennedy that are at Hillcrest. We also know that Prairie Park itself within the boundaries has 24 ESL students that reside in Prairie Park and attend the Hillcrest cluster site. So a total of that, 62, what happens if they're moved to Cordley? And so adding those into the option 2 Cordley, it would appear that this is what would happen to Cordley, and they actually almost become a full 3-section school. And there would be an increase or an addition of 4 staff needed to make that happen. But that's also then reducing Hillcrest. So what we would likely see is the 4 teachers transferring out of Hillcrest and into Cordley to cover the transfer of kids. So basically the staff would just follow those kids. And then the supplemental ESL staffing ratios that go on top of the classroom teachers for support in the buildings would be revised within those ratios and placed in the buildings based on that change. And so this would be kind of a neutral change of staff. But I think it was a scenario somebody had asked about, so we thought we would share that. It then opens up and changes Hillcrest back to a 2-section school, but it also opens it up for the opportunity of possibly helping with the West Side capacities that tend to be where a lot of our kids are in those larger buildings. So the last thing to share is just some utilization information. And I don't know if you remember this chart. I briefly shared it with the boundary committee, and I think I've shared it with the budget committee of the calculated capacity that came from some of the RSP information. And then just sharing that our actual enrollment for September 21 this year was this number here in the green, 248 down to 457. And then just what is that number to the capacity calculation? And then just for a chart reference, what is that kind of range that they say is kind of the optimal utilization? And it's somewhere between that 85 and 95% is sort of that recommended, suggested optimization utilization of a building. And buildings can be unique, and maybe for some it can be higher or lower, but that's kind of the range of just looking at. The red here in the middle were just a highlight of the percentage if it was, I believe, under the, 75%-ish mark, it looks like. So just kind of highlighting. And so you can see some were as low as 40, 60, 56. And so what happens with these options if we kind of look at the impact of the change? And so option 1 was our Prairie Park in New York. And you can see from the new enrollment number, the percentage, and you can see those really hit the high end of that 95%. And so looking at option 2, it spreads it or changes it down a little bit and brings New York up, brings Cordley up, If you look back, Cordley was at 56 and New York is at 67. So it brings those up and it helps lessen some at Prairie Park. And so that would be that scenario. And then the option 2A would be looking basically at option 2, but then the spread or the change of the ESL students. And New York and Prairie Park aren't so much impacted, but you can then see the impact to Cordley and Hillcrest. So those were just, I think the question was, what does the change do to those? And so and again, all of this is estimates, projections of kiddos, and, will they actually be in the buildings next year in the same capacity? And we'll have to revisit and monitor these as we get better information. So everything's subject to change based on actual, but this is the best that we know at this time. So that's really the end of information Zach and I had to share. We can try to answer questions or go from there. So I'll give it back to Anna and questions or.
Okay. Any initial questions for Kathy and Zach? And then if Kathy, if you want to stop sharing, I think we could see everyone, or
Okay.
if we have to get consensus or something. Any initial questions before we try to work through which scenario we want to pass on to Boundary? And remember, us passing on the scenario to we're Boundary, to BPAC, it is based off what they requested, and then they will look at it, and we will present this information to the board on April 12th, and ultimately the board will make the decision. We are just giving recommendations based off what was requested from us through the Budget and Program and Evaluation Committee. So any initial questions before we work through and try to see which scenario we want to hand off to them?
And I had a question. What's the importance or the goal in terms of if Prairie Park is a Title I school? Is that a benefit for, the district, for that elementary getting that status and that additional support? Because they aren't now. I just didn't know if that's.
I don't know if it's necessarily a benefit. The title funds dollars that we receive is based off of the SES of students and where they are concentrated. But if Prairie Park does become a Title I school, they will have additional resources to support the students there, like some of our other title. So I guess from that perspective, there would be additional resources, which often include staff that would be there to provide additional support. So yes.
I had a quick question. I saw on option 1, there is the slide that went through the number of FTE and then the cost savings. I might have missed it. Was the same slide presented for option 2 and looking at the number of FTE? I may have missed that. I apologize if I did.
It was, and it actually it changed from the 5 to the 6.
Okay, but the goal.
The other numbers are the same.
Okay, so attrition would still 99% of the time take care of it.
Yeah,
that's my understanding. But Anna or Samry can respond.
Yes, based off the number of openings we have currently, and then the number of staff that would need to follow, like if Prairie Park grows by 4 sections, 4 staff will follow, and if New York were to grow like that, and then just the openings in the district, and there are openings, Samry, am I not wrong, in both Prairie Park and New York currently. And so there are openings all across the district, minus the growing of the sections.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I had a question about the capacity in the rooms. So when you say there are like one room available or 5 rooms available, are those all like regular class, like rooms that are outfitted to be classrooms and they're not like learning pockets, or are we trying to make learning pockets work for classrooms? Or?
No, these were all classroom spaces that are not currently being used as classrooms, but for other purposes.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding, so like New York, like when I was looking at that, it seemed like Prairie Park, like even like how many empty classrooms would there be after these moves, so that if we did have to go from 3 to 4 sections or whatever, like it seemed like we were pretty close for some of them, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to think about how much room would it have to grow beyond your projections? So like, are there actually enough classrooms to go if we need to go from 3 to 4 sections on a couple grade levels next year for the different schools?
Yeah, so with Prairie Park in particular, there was the opportunity to expand to 6 classrooms. We would have to move a wall in order to move to 6. It could currently hold 5. We identified 5 spaces that could be used in classrooms. And with these options, we would be increasing the number of sections at Prairie Park to be at capacity to fill those 5.
And how about at New York and Cordley? What was their like total classrooms versus how many we'd be adding?
Cordley had 1 available class, or I'm sorry, New York had 1 available classroom, and with option 2, you wouldn't be increasing the sections there. But with option 1, you would increase the section used at 1 classroom. So they would be at full capacity when it comes to classroom usage. Not necessarily the amount of students in each classroom, but the number of classrooms being used. Cordley, we had the space to use 5 additional classrooms. And I'm looking back through the slides, Kathy, and I believe at Cordley, and there's 2 different options, option A and option 2A, or option 2 and option 2A. With option just 2, it added 1 section.
Yeah.
And with option 2A, they ended up adding, was it 4 sections?
4, so they'd still be under the 5.
Yeah.
And then I'll just share, Courtly was originally built out to be a 3-section school, so that's why they have so much capacity. They're not at levels, so. Any other questions, or we can start going through scenarios to see where we are. If your camera is off, we would just ask you to place your preference in the, so I could just do a doodle thing, right, Zach? Like a poll to have people vote on it. Let me figure this out. How do I do that, Zach? Can you do it, Zach?
If you make me the host.
I will make Zach the host, so yeah, you all won't have to go in on this learning curve with me. Hold on 1 second. You're the presenter, Zach. So what Zach will do is put the options and then you can vote on the one that you support. And if there's two that's close, then we'll narrow it down. If they're all close, we can have more discussion. Is everybody okay with that? Just voting on the scenario? And is everybody clear what the scenarios are? Okay.
And I believe you need to make me the host in order to do it, not just the presenter.
How do I make you the host? Hold on, Zach, let me figure it out.
Dawn is on her way over.
I'm sure they taught me this before.
Is it under participant?
Yeah.
And go back to Zach. Yours is different. Hold on.
See, I think it's because I don't even see the poll thing to do. No. Mine's has been different because of the way I entered, so I am, what is this? Feedback.
I had a little, go over there to participant up there.
So Dawn is actually the polling coordinator.
It's you, Dawn,
To do what? Oh,
the polling coordinator.
how do we vote?
I think you just put the three scenarios. Just put option 1, option 2, option 2A, and then we can vote. That's all you have to do. All right, Dawn will go back and she's gonna present it. We'll be ready shortly.
Okay, Zach, I need your help here. Where do I go? You're on mute.
I wasn't talking yet. Sorry. Okay, so you should have 3 buttons down in the left-hand corner next to, or right-hand corner, I'm sorry, participants and chat.
Okay.
When you click on those, do you see polling?
No, I see Q&A.
Okay, go back to participants
Uh-huh.
and open that tab. Should open on the left-hand side. Next to your name,
Uh-huh.
do you see where it says polling coordinator?
Yes.
Okay, can you click on that to open a poll?
I'm clicking. Nothing's happening. What should it look like? Nothing's happening.
This has been a really fun exercise.
Yeah.
I want this.
So you told me to click here. Nothing happens. How do you? Oh, yeah, it is now.
It's not letting her activate it, so we're gonna have to do the old-fashioned raise your hand. I'll be back. So so option one, if you're in favor of option one, Zach, do you?
Hey, Dawn, real quick, could you go up to file?
Okay, I'll just wait.
Sorry, just one last ditch effort. Up at the top, file.
Okay.
Does it allow you to open a poll up there? It should be your second option.
Open poll questions? Yeah.
Okay, I don't know that,
Says,
you don't have any saved though, do you? So I don't know if it's gonna let you just create it.
it says you cannot review polling information because the polling panel is not currently available. Click OK to open the polling panel. Let's see what happens. Okay. I think I can do it. All right. It opened up and it says, we want multiple choice. Okay. Okay, start my question here. You want me to just put which option do you prefer and people can put 1, 2, or 3? 1, 2, or 2A?
Oh, and the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Do you guys see anything?
It opens up for me, but it's not letting me type an answer. It just has a submit button.
Same.
I think because you didn't put in options, we have nothing to pick.
So you can go ahead and close this poll and we'll just have to create another one with those options in it so that we can select them.
Okay. I apologize. Zach, so if I just put, do you want option, you're still going to say, you're still going to respond which option they actually want, right?
Yeah, so the question just needs to be what option. And then the choices, there should be 3 choices that we can choose from. 1, 2, and 2A. So did you choose multiple choice?
I'm putting them in right now on option
Okay,
3.
perfect. Great.
Nope.
Nice work, Todd. Very good. Nicely done.
Has everyone voted?
It's actually letting, if you're an attendee, please do not vote. We don't
It's
have
not.
time to.
It's not allowing them to.
Yeah, somebody just texted,
Oh,
said they
someone
can't.
did just go.
So, because it shows 3 people can vote. Once we have, Kathy is not voting, Zach is not voting because they are not members of Boundary. And I'm actually not voting, but I could be a tiebreaker. So we have our 14. Somebody, did everybody who's on Boundary vote? Okay,
So it looks
This is
like
Carol. I voted.
okay, thank you.
option 2 and 2A are tied with 7 people.
Do we want to send out a new poll with just option 2 and 2A and to split that tie?
Yes,
I would be kind of, oh, well, that's fine. I would just be interested to hear people's logic for either side, but if that's the next step, that's fine.
okay. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We'll be prepared on the next time we have to vote. Again, attendees, please don't vote. I think everyone has voted. It's pretty close, but it looks like it's option 2A. So what we can do, honestly, is 2A with a Budget Program and Evaluation Committee. They're so close that I can visit with the board because it's really about whether the ESL students shift or not. So, but they're so similar that Kathy, if I'm misspeaking for Budget and Program and Evaluation Committee, it won't impact what they're looking at. So they can move forward, and then the board in their discussion can either ask for more information and or decide to go with 2 or 2A. It gives them, the board, an option. Okay, our due diligence for this part of the process is complete. Boundary, our next meeting, Don, do you know when it is? It's our regular meeting.
April
And April 15th. So April 15th, the board would have had their presentation and made a decision. So that will then determine what our next step will be. Big picture, we could get some more direction from the board if there's some other things that we need to look at or to address some of the other things that were outlined in that. So we'll just kind of hold until after April 12th and then either update on what's happening and what that means and check into some of the additional components. So thank you all so much for your commitment and attentiveness to this difficult task. Okay, thank you. Dawn will send the minutes like she does, and then we'll see everyone on April 15th. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Dawn.
Yes.
Hold on, stop recording. If you
Mhm.
Oh, thanks.
are going to talk about the
Hold on.
poll and stuff, you can stop recording so people won't see the aftermath.
No, I'm trying to. I don't see my foot anymore. I see the light, but when I click on it, nothing's happening.
It's still recording.
I know. Let me go here. Hold up.
Oh, I can stop it.